That's the stereotype, isn't it? You become a senior manager, you become an executive, you become C-suite, and then you get on a board. That's the traditional journey that everyone sort of just knows that that's how it works. But
Yes.
it doesn't have to.
Welcome to part 2 of my discussion with Joe Woodhouse. In this episode, we discuss Joe's journey from individual contributor to non-exec. We're going to talk about how you can build the skills that you need to make the transition, if that's of interest to you. So, Joe, did you go about deliberately building the skills that you needed for a non-exec role? And if so, how?
Yeah, look, I did a few things along the way. Once I started realizing this was something I enjoyed and seemed to have some skills at, I did start applying. At one of the boards I've been on, they regularly run elections, and I threw my hat in the ring one year and got to the point where they interviewed me, and they did not proceed. I did not get onto the ballot. And they offered me some feedback, which is always such a gift. And I jumped on that. I said, yes, anything you can tell me. And they had a lot of useful things to say, which I specifically made a point of developing over the next couple of years. They wanted to see more experience outside the IT swim lanes, and that's when I got onto my garden committee, which I thought was a good way to demonstrate that. And yes, it was, absolutely, because when I reapplied 2 years later, I was accepted. They had all sorts of interesting feedback about, I mean, you've probably already gotten the impression I'm a man of many words. I will never use few words when many words are possible. It's the whole Mark Twain thing. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I've written you a long letter instead. That's absolutely me. And they said, you need to know when to stop talking when you're answering a question, right? Probably the single best interview advice I've ever been given. They said there were so many times where you gave us a perfect answer at the 90-second mark, but you kept talking for another 30 seconds and you dragged us back from that perfect answer. I thought, oh, well, what an interesting thing. So I practiced that. I mean, I love job interviews. I'm a little weird for this. People often look at me strangely when I say this, but I love job interviews. I think they are fantastic practice for things. I wish I could be in an interview every week. I mean, I don't want to waste any hiring manager's time. It would have to be for something I genuinely was willing to do and thought I could do. But I love job interviews, and that's where my freelancing background and constantly doing the sales. And just like you said of yourself in the early 2000s, starting your own business, you're the salesperson, you're the marketing person, you're the one pitching everything. So every business-to-business contract is really a job interview. I mean, when you're a freelancer, it's a job interview for your own services. And I must have had hundreds of these over the last 20 years, and I'm a better person for it. I'm not just better at job interviewing. I think I'm a better person, a better husband, a better friend, for it. There's so many things that we learn from doing that. And I'm just remembered, you asked me earlier, like the other things people might do to help develop these skills. There's some fantastic advice I've received recently, which I'm looking into. And it was not quite for what we're talking about, but close enough. I'm going to mention it to your viewers. And it's improv theatre. Right? The question came up, how can I be better at thinking on my feet quickly in those rooms where the decisions are being made, in the job interviews, while selling? And the idea was, improv training is literally something you can be trained in to think better on your feet and be faster and be more creative.
So have you been and done that?
I've never done it either, and I'm looking into it. There are places in London that do this, and I'm going to take it. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Some very smart people have suggested it to me, and if they think it's a good idea, I want to try it out.
So maybe there's a new business idea for me there. I should copy that Radio 4 show, Just a Minute. Get people to do improv.
Yeah, absolutely. We could get a bunch of IT consultants and IT individual contributors in a round room panel and do our own little quiz show. Absolutely. I'd watch that, and I'd be part of that if you'd have me. That sounds fun.
Yeah, I think it would be great fun. I mean, it would be great fun, I'm sure, and quite amusing, but also, as you say, quite useful training. That could be a fun thing to look into. I'm guessing IPSY was the first one you applied for and you got that feedback the first year and then went to the communal gardens. So how did you find IPSY as a goal, and then how did you find the communal gardens one as a way of progressing those skills?
There's a general concept that I use for almost everything in my life, and I call it my luck surface area. How much am I exposed to opportunities around me? There's a brilliant study. If your viewers are not already aware of the work of Richard Wiseman, who has done studies into luck, he did some groundbreaking studies, I think almost 20 years ago now. This is not a new idea, but what a beautiful idea this was. He recruited people for a study, and he specifically said, I want people who self-identify as lucky, and I also want people who self-identify as unlucky. And he set them all the same task, which was to slam down a 100-page newspaper and say, count how many photographs are in this newspaper, and you've got like 2 minutes to do it, which is a very, very hard task. You could not possibly complete that by flipping through 100 pages of newspaper. But somewhere like around page 7 or something, there was a half-page ad which said, stop looking, the number of photographs in this newspaper is whatever, let's say 117. Right? I'm just making numbers up. And the people who self-identified as lucky noticed that, reported that number, and were correct. And the people who self-identified as not lucky did not notice that and were scanning things. So Wiseman's conclusions were that a lot of what we call luck are a result of, first of all, having not a narrow focus, but being more receptive to opportunities and being more willing to act on them. So increasing your perceptual or luck surface area, as I call it, is a way to find these things out. For the garden committee one, I'm a resident. The garden committee has newsletters and notices, and they had meetings every now and then. I just started showing up. I mean, that's 90% of the way to do anything at all, right? Just show up. I just started showing up to these meetings. I got myself known. I didn't say anything. I wasn't there necessarily to tell them what they were doing wrong and what they should do instead. I did do that a couple of times, but they liked me anyway. By showing up and contributing and then just doing little things like for a garden party, putting my hand up, do you need some help setting out the furniture and setting up the tables? And do you need help picking up the trash afterwards? Just showing up and build political capital, right? So be in positions where you can notice these opportunities and people with opportunities can notice you.
That's so key. I started my first business in 2001. And within a few years, I got feedback from a number of people that knew me. It's like, John, you're so lucky. Your business is doing so well. You know, how have you managed to get so lucky? My answer to all is, I'm not lucky. I just go and talk to people and be curious. And I ask them lots of questions. Strange enough, if you ask people a lot of questions, they start to think you're interesting. They start to think you're clever, even though all you've done is ask them questions. It's a very strange thing, but then you start to get recognized as a bit of an expert. And I said, I'm not lucky. I've just gone and met a whole bunch of people. I'm a techie. I'm scared of selling. Didn't want to do sales. So to avoid having to do sales, I asked them questions, was interested, and asked them what problems they had. And actually, that's kind of consulting, isn't it? So by doing that and asking the questions, and then occasionally saying, oh, you're facing this problem with your business. I have met Jane over here who solves these problems for you. Can I introduce you? That led to people then reciprocating and introducing me and my brother who joined me in the business by then, introducing us to business. And we got lucky because we put a lot of hard work into meeting people, talking to them and being curious and making introductions. And as you say, it's that surface area of luck. We manufacture that luck, not by design, but by trying to avoid selling and by trying to avoid it by being curious to people and networking. It's so powerful.
This morning I was mentoring one of the people I mentor, and we were talking about luck surface area. And I said, imagine there are diamonds raining down from the sky, but they evaporate as soon as they touch the ground. Like, I want you to run outside with a bucket, not a teaspoon. have a big area to catch these opportunities. More will fall into your hands with the bigger surface area. So absolutely, I endorse everything you just said. Talk to people, make connections, help people, and it needs to be authentic help for the sake of helping them. It can't be an obviously transactional thing. Hi, now you owe me. But if you've genuinely helped people, people remember that. They absolutely remember that.
Yeah, and if you make it transactional, they'll remember that too, and it doesn't win you any points.
We can always tell if someone's come up to us at a networking event, if they're about to ask us for a job or they're about to hit on us and ask us out, we can always tell, right? We know when people are needy and when they're desperate and when they're trying to get something from us. So we can also always tell when people aren't doing that.
Yeah, and again, it's that very difference, isn't it, between curiosity and being genuinely interested. And you can tell when somebody's actively listening, then asking follow-up questions versus like nodding along, and then straight away they'll in with their ask of what they want. Let me pivot back now to the question that you were trying to answer a minute ago of what are the board roles like? What is a typical day looking there?
Okay, so a board, a non-executive director, the non-executive part means you aren't part of the executive. It's an obvious thing to say, but what that means is you are not there for any operational or delivery purposes, right? So your senior leadership team, the executives of the company, are there to execute the company's strategy and mission and to deliver against some metrics. A non-executive director is supposed to be non-operational. And this was said to me in a beautiful phrase I've absolutely stolen and made my own. A non-executive director should be hands out but noses in. And so the role of a non-exec or a NED, an NED, is basically governance and strategy. And I like to say that means doing the right things or ensuring that the organization is doing the right things in the right ways. So what does that mean day to day? We might be having an off-site for let's come up with some strategies to address a changing business landscape. It might be that the executive team have escalated an issue to us. They say, we've found something that needs a decision made. Here's an argument for doing it this way. Here's an argument for doing it this way. Which one does the board think is the most appropriate? This is a lot of what you were saying earlier before about we can't always give the people we manage everything they ask for because sometimes there are reasons. And that has never been more true to me or visible to me than for the work I do on boards. And this is also now my working definition of politics, right? I say politics is the art and science of basically dividing up finite resources. Right? The board does not have enough time, money, or staff to greenlight every business case. And it's not because necessarily the board thinks any of the business cases are bad or wrong. Right? It's very, very realistic that there might be 10 proposals that the board is being asked to make a decision on, and all of them are good ideas. Right? You might have 10 good ideas. If it was as simple as there are 6 good ideas and 4 bad ideas, that's obvious, right? But if you've got 10 good ideas, but you can still only say yes to 6, then there needs to be an approach and hopefully a structured approach that has some transparency, that helps people understand the why, helps people feel that it was fairly decided, which of the 10, which 6 are in the organization's best interests. And it's not as simple as which will make us the most money. It might be that for cash flow reasons, the board says we want to say yes to this one because this will give us £1 million in a month, but we can't say yes to that one, even though that will give us £50 million, but we won't see a penny of it for 4 years.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing that a lot of software engineers miss, is it's not just look at the value and the return of a project. It's how are we going to fund it? What's the cash flow impact of it? Now, if we fund it from existing cash, that has one cost. What's our internal cost of the cash? If we fund it from debt, that's going to have a different cost. How are we measuring that? Are we going to do a blended funding? As I try and put this to a lot of software engineers in simpler terms of those estimates that a lot of us hate. Somebody somewhere has to make an investment decision. They have to decide, do we greenlight this project or that project? And those estimates can matter, not whether or not they're accurate, but to give us a broad scope of, this project is going to cost $1 million. We don't have the cash to fund it. This project cost $500,000. We could fund it. But if it takes $500,000 and it's not going to return for 6 years, maybe we don't fund it. So there's an interaction we forget between all those different things. As you say, we can't just look at one and say, that's good, we'll do it. That's bad, we won't do it. There has to be a lot more nuance and a lot more detail to it.
Right, yeah. So the cash flow implications, as we both just said, are something that I think the engineering mindset isn't really thinking about. They might still be talking about, if we do this, we might lift revenue by 10%, which will increase profits by whatever, 3%. That's not a hard calculation to make, although I think most engineers do struggle to put numbers behind the impact of what they're proposing and what they've actually delivered. But
absolutely,
cash flow is everything. Cash is king, right? Cash is reality. You live and die as a business. I mean, if we can't make payroll next month, that's pretty much the end of everything, right? We do need to have money coming in every month. And a lot of decisions that in my youth as a junior consultant were inexplicable to me. And I would think, why on earth has someone decided such a stupid thing? There were almost certainly reasons along these lines that I had no language for, even.
So let me pull up that thread, Joe. So I learned about cash flow and a lot of these issues by starting my own business and by having to deal with the fact that I had to pay contractors, I had to pay staff. And then a few years later decided I want to put back the background to that, so I did an MBA. How did you go about learning that? How did you learn these things so that you were then prepared in a board role?
Your viewers are going to hate this. I also did an MBA. But this was well before I had ambitions to get into a portfolio career or even management. I did an MBA for a couple of reasons. The first is I actually love studying. I wish I was perpetually completing, whatever a next master's or PhD would be. I don't have time to do this. I don't have the money to do it, but I would be so happy if I did. But I had...
Yeah, me too.
I had an opportunity to go to grad school and do a couple of, do a degree or do a master's. And I was looking at things and thinking, well, I could do a law degree. I mean, I'd probably enjoy doing a law degree. I'd love finishing a law degree. I started one a long time ago and never finished it. And I thought there's no better qualification for enabling mischief than a law degree. And that appealed to me greatly, making mischief. But I thought, is that actually going to get me promotions? Is that going to get me more money? Is that going to lead to personally more interesting work in my current career? Right, that would be a career change, which maybe I can think about that. But I looked at stuff and thought, I'm not going to do a law degree. I'm going to do an MBA. In fact, I decided I'm going to do a double MBA, a double master's. So I did a master's in info systems and an MBA at the same time, which was quite a journey, let me tell you. But the reason I settled on why do an MBA as a consultant is I thought it will give me the language and concepts that senior management are using. It will mean I can climb the food chain a little bit, and instead of be talking to a database team lead, I can now start talking to their manager, who might be head of database, or maybe even their manager, the IT manager, and perhaps occasionally their manager, who might be CIO or CTO. And that if I understand their language and understand the things that matter to them and the decisions they are asked to make, I can now frame my problems that I'm dealing with, or rather their problems that I'm trying to solve for them, in the language that matters to them, exactly as you were saying earlier. If I say technical debt is bad for this reason as an engineering manager, the board doesn't even know what that means, let alone care about it. But if we say, imagine we had a debt on the balance sheet that we were not paying the interest on, that's going to get out of hand real soon. We need, at a minimum, to have a sensible plan that fits in our cash flow for servicing the interest, else that debt is going to get really out of control. And after a certain point, if our liabilities increase above our assets more than a certain ratio, our credit rating gets downgraded, and our ability to borrow or do other things at that sort of level gets harmed. Like, that's interest, instantly of interest to them. And my single best success for working on technical debt was to talk about opportunity costs, saying as the costs of unserved technical debt rise, our ability to respond to feature requests from product and to deal with important bug fixes from our important clients decreases. It is an ongoing opportunity cost that we need to control in order to be able to respond to these other unplanned needs.
I've had the same success with talking about reputational damage when dealing with
Exactly.
security. Focus on the reputational damage, focus on this is a financial penalty from the ICO if we get this wrong and we get compromised. And so it's talking about that risk, talking about the wider impacts to the business, which again, we tend to overlook as engineers because I think this comes back to the curiosity. Quite often we don't talk to enough people and understand the rest of the business because there's a little bit of a thing in the press, social media over the last 20 years that we've glorified technical people as though we drive everything. But realistically, software engineering is a team sport, and so is business. It's just the wider team. We can't do our job without the finance people because at the end of the day, we've got to pay the salaries. We've got to fund that somehow. And the finance team decide whether that's from cash flow or from debt or from equity raise. We can't do much stuff without HR because we do need to hire people. We need to onboard people. We can't do anything without sales, much as we might hate them and want to criticize them. If we don't sell, we don't have any cash flow. We can't borrow any money in the debt. We can't do a raise. We can't raise against equity because without sales and without something demonstrating that, we won't succeed. And we can pick out every part of the business is making a contribution, much as we like to believe that everything revolves around tech. We need all those other parts as well. Without it, we wouldn't be able to succeed. Again, whatever sport analogy you take, so I'd say it's football. You can't just have a team of goalies. You need somebody that's going to be up front. You need some of that midfield. You need some of that support. And I'm going to stop there with soccer because I don't play football and don't follow it. So what does a typical engagement look like for you as a Ned, both in the communal garden one is something very different and in IPSI?
Well, in the communal gardens, let me just bring up something that I don't think I'm talking out of school for any of this. Our water bill was massively higher year on year recently, like more than 5 times higher the previous year. And we're saying, what's up with that? Is that reasonable? Do we maybe have leaking pipes somewhere? Do we need to get plumbing leak tested? And we had those on the committee who are more heavily involved in the actual gardening part of it say, well, the weather has been really different and it actually has been pretty dry over the last 12 months compared to the year before that. So I do believe we would genuinely be using more water, but 5 times more, does that make sense? And then someone else chimes in with yeah, that might even make sense. It's not that we're using 5 times as much water, but the water bill has gone up for the same usage, but we are also using more. And so little things like that sometimes.
So that wonderfully illustrates again that diversity, doesn't it? If you just have people of finance on that board, you don't get the gardener perspective that we're using more water. If you just have gardeners, you don't get the finance perspective as, hey, maybe the bill has gone up. There's been inflation in that time. So a very simple point, but I think that really nicely illustrates the importance of that diversity of backgrounds and of thought. Sorry, Joe.
Just as with software user groups, the people who get involved in garden committees are typically there because they are the most passionate and have the strongest feelings. And frequently they have their own little areas that they care passionately about and don't really care too much about everything else, but they're there to see that that part of it all gets done. So we have a lovely lady, great friend, I learn a lot from her, who is very, very concerned and involved with flood management and flood planning, since that's a growing concern as London's infrastructure just doesn't get invested in. Thames Water ran out of money and needed to be bailed out, all sorts of things. And so she might be quiet in a meeting and then someone says, oh yeah, we do need to start putting aside capital to pay for a paths upgrade. And she says, yes, and we need to make sure it's a permeable material to help with water absorption. Right? And none of the rest of us would even be thinking about that. And she's there correctly, having assessed that no one else would ever think about that issue if not for not for her making sure. I mean, that's not the only thing she does. I'm making her sound very one-dimensional and very far
No,
from
I
the
think
case.
you brilliantly illustrated in what you said there why it's so valuable, and that you mentioned that each of you, and you've given a great example of that lady, care passionately about one small bit. That's a perfect recipe for a bunch of people that care about their area, and I don't want to sound harsh, but maybe don't care about the other areas as much or at all. And you say a perfect scenario if you turn up with a lot of potential conflict, and a perfect way of learning conflict resolution and how to handle that and how to work through it, I think.
Right, right. I mean, because our resources are absolutely finite, not that large. And so, okay, we need to be thinking about replacing the playground equipment for the children, but we also need to be thinking about replacing the locks on the gates. But maybe we need to think about, when the fences are going to need some work. So, this is very much, even though we're a committee, not a board, this is board level thinking. Like, what's coming ahead in the future? What do we need to sensibly put aside now? Because any one of those projects would overwhelm one year's budget. So it would be prudent to just be setting aside some money each year now because we know these costs are coming. The playground equipment probably has about a 10-year lifespan. So sometime in the next 4 years, we're going to have to spend a considerable amount of money on that. That's okay. Start putting it aside now. And again, opportunity costs come up, right? Replacing the garden locks was not a planned expense. They sort of catastrophically fell apart. And we said, we're tired of the particular vendor we had supplying it. Let's change vendor. Let's invest in this, get it right, spend a little more now so we won't be spending so much later. An absolutely typical board decision, right? We might have a migration cost now to reduce cost of ownership going on in the future. Very, very common question that's often put to the board: spend more now or spend more later. And there's never a right answer, right? This is the key. There's no one right answer. If it was, we wouldn't need boards. If all of these problems had simple, obvious answers, what would a board even do?
Well, I think you've also illustrated why some people that I've met that have been on big company boards are so terrible on a board of a startup. Because in the big company, they've sat there with millions and millions of pounds. And it's like, okay, we've got this problem, we'll just buy a solution. Where in your little communal garden or just small startup that's just a seed funding round, you haven't got that. You've always got that tension of we have all these different things. How do we balance those priorities? How do we resolve that? And how do we do that with imperfect information? Because again, it's very easy when you're software engineers and IC to think, well, the big boss knows what they're doing, the board know what they're doing, they should have perfect information. And the reality is that most of us sat there as executives or on the board, we're just as clueless in different ways. We've got maybe more experience in something, but it's never with perfect information. It's never with the perfect resources. It's always trying to make that decision with some level of imperfect information, without the resources, or maybe even without the right ideas of what the right solution is. So, it's trying to balance that. I think so many people miss.
Well, I've mostly talked about the communal garden. I'll talk a little bit more about IPSI. I need to be a bit more circumspect with what I can say here. But IPSI is a not-for-profit, and that has influenced a lot of, I might say, staff thinking or attitudes. And there is frequently an attitude in any not-for-profit. I mean, I'm no longer talking about IPSI specifically here, but a lot of people who wish to work at not-for-profits or end up there are almost philosophically opposed to the idea of profit. They think a not-for-profit means don't be profitable, which I think I have to say, and it's a little harsh on me, I call that a rookie mistake. Of course it needs to be profitable. Right? The organisation needs to remain a going concern because we need to pay the bills and we need to pay the salaries, and if the money runs out, then the organisation ceases to exist and its mission is no longer being served. So not-for-profit does not mean don't make a profit. It simply means we aren't distributing profits as dividends. That's literally all it means. That's the meaning under law. We want to run profitably.
Ideally, as well, make a profit and do what so many of the universities have done: invest that profit, create a fund that's going to provide a return and keep the organisation going and enable the organisation to do more.
Yeah, you couldn't be more right, though. I mean, that is really at the heart of it. I mean, if we are involved in a not-for-profit or a charity, it's because we believe in the mission. We want that mission to succeed, and almost all missions need money to succeed. And the more money we have to use, the more of that mission we can achieve. So I would love every not-for-profit to be making tens or hundreds of millions of pounds or dollars a year, because how much good could they then do with it, right? That would be a wonderful problem to have. So some of my issues on the IPSI board are we need to think about, everything needs to be looking at potentially being revenue generating, like where does money come from? And a lot of staff weren't entirely happy with that. They seemed to think there was something unethical or immoral about trying to make money in a not-for-profit scenario. And so that's been a sort of path of education, because you can't just tell someone, change your mind, right? I mean, you need to win hearts and minds. You need to make the case. You need to tell the story. You need to speak the language that they know and speak to the values that they have, right? I mean, most big business decision making, this is the elephant in the room no one wants to admit. And I'm sure you've seen this in your own work as well. But most important business decisions are not being made on the merits and are not being made on rational grounds. They're being made on values and emotions. We desperately pretend that that is not the case, but the biggest decisions in the world at the biggest companies in the world are being made on values and emotions. And the business case is often almost an excuse after the fact to justify what someone wants to do.
I think you put it brilliantly there as well, and something we shouldn't forget, that we talked earlier about if you want to get buy-in from the executive or your manager or the board, speak their language, speak to what they care about, speak about what's their passion and what their concerns. And you just put it the other way. You've got to talk to these staff in their language, talk about what their concerns. And that's something else that we should remember, is that all the people, whether you're, the most junior engineer, the janitor, the receptionist, or the MD, or the chairman of the board, we're all people. And as you say, we all make most of these decisions on emotion and then justify them with the facts afterwards. And we're all tainted by our biases. So we can communicate to everyone in the same way, and understanding what they care about, what they're passionate about, what language they speak.
As you say, everyone from the janitor to the MD probably has issues that occasionally have them lying awake in the middle of the night on their mind. Every single one of them have things in their work life and their non-work lives that are frustrating them, right, or irritating them, or preventing them from getting something done. Right? We aren't that different, right? I once heard jobs at all described as like early high school with money, and that has never left me. It's all still the same issues. People want to have fun. People want to be fulfilled. People want to be liked. People don't want to be pointed at and laughed at. All of the same motivations that mattered to us as teenagers are pretty much still there. They don't ever go away. We like to pretend they do, but I'm here to put my hand up and say, no, I don't think they go away.
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of myth that we grow up and become like older and wiser, and we start becoming adults. It's a bit of a myth, really, isn't it? We maybe get better at regulating our emotions, as you mentioned earlier. We maybe improve our soft skills over time, but we're still fundamentally human. We still have the flaws, the biases, the character traits, and all the other things. Moving on to a different question I want to ask about. So we talked about some of the skills, and we've talked about how we both did an MBA. One of the reasons I started asking people about NED roles and keen to follow that for software engineers is I know a number of software engineering managers who were approached over the last 18 months or so by various companies trying to sell them training courses on becoming a board advisor or an NED, charging thousands of pounds. And I sort of looked at some of these and thought, well, why? Why would you do some of these things? What are they offering? Because if you want to know how to run a business, start a business. You don't have to go and pay somebody for the privilege of doing that. You can just do it. If you want some executive experience, you can work through your career and pursue it that way. You could do an MBA and you get a genuine certificate and something that proves, depending on your view of academics and MBA, but it's something that's recognised, where a company selling you a certificate that, I can go on Canva and make a certificate, it doesn't necessarily convey any value. So what are your thoughts on these? Have you come across any training courses that have been useful? Do you think people should pursue them?
Look, I'm not going to comment on any one specifically. Let me just talk about the whole industry of this, and it is an industry. If you go into any non-fiction bookshop, the largest section in the bookshop is the self-help section. People are always hoping to find a bit of secret wisdom that gets them ahead, right? And these people, and I don't say this cruelly or with contempt, they're selling a dream. Right? They're absolutely selling a dream, and there is always a market for people selling dreams. And it's the same way for people getting on Instagram thinking, I'll become an influencer. It's the same way people self-publish, I'm going to be the next J.K. Rowling. Do you know she was this old before she sold her first book? That could be me. And we all have a dream. And anything that looks like it's giving us a leg up onto that dream or a secret advantage that we can use to get ahead of some of the competition. Like if it's only 1 in a million who can become a rock star or a supermodel or a J.K. Rowling level, author, then if I can do something that gets me ahead of 100,000, then that's a great start. And there's the saying, right? In a gold rush, don't go out and dig for gold. In a gold rush, sell shovels. And that's the way to make money in a gold rush. And so I think of all of these businesses, and I agree there do seem to be more of them now than there were even just 5 years ago, are in the business of selling shovels. People are dissatisfied with their careers in ways I think are a little new. I think the pandemic started this, and the recessions and political change and interest rates and manipulation of democracy and the many bad things that social media can do. I mean, I think it does many good things, but certainly it seems to be doing many bad things too. All of this is adding up, and people are just dissatisfied. They're either feeling a bit of financial pain, things are costing more, but their salaries aren't going up. A lot of people, particularly in IT, have lost their jobs in the last couple of years. It's a tremendous number of layoffs from not just big tech, but lots of companies. So the promise of, well, I probably won't become a rock star, and I probably won't become a supermodel, and I'm probably not going to become a sports star, and unfortunately, I'm definitely not going to become Batman. So, what's left? Maybe some of these board roles, because I won't kid you and your viewers, some of them are very, very well compensated, right? If you're at a large publicly listed company, some of these board of director roles are making 300,000, 400,000, half a million. Not very many of them, but enough to latch onto as the dream. And so anyone selling it, here's how you get your dream. It's a shovel. Go out and dig for gold. Here's a shovel. The shovel only costs you £3,000. But think about how much you could make. Do I think they're all snake oil, therefore? No, I think some are probably better than others. There's no real way to tell, though. I mean, I'd say treat it like hiring a builder for an extension. Just get recommendations and word of mouth. There's probably no other way to tell who are the good ones. Definitely some seem to be more reputable than others. And interestingly, I think one of the ways of testing this is the extent to which they make promises. Right? There are some out there that say, do our course, join our program, shadow some people, and we guarantee you a placement. Look, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but what does that even mean in practice? Are they saying we guarantee you a paid placement? I mean, that's just frankly not a credible claim at all. And if they're saying we guarantee you a placement as, I mean, is it as a fractional C-suite? Is it as a board advisor? Is it as a non-executive? Because these are all different things and they work in very different ways. And they're all valuable. And for myself, I would like a portfolio of one or more of each of these things, but they are different things. And there, I would say, it's like the many people who are selling, I'll review your resume for you and I'll optimize your LinkedIn for you and I'll do an SEO optimization of your website for you. Many of these services are valuable, and I think not a single one of them is necessary, right? Every single thing that anyone...
That's a nice way of putting it.
Right? The same information is available there for someone who puts in the effort. And this is a great segue into how do you get onto a board. Don't start looking for the paid roles, right? The paid roles, there aren't that many of them. They are highly competitive. And if someone has no relevant experience or practice, put yourself in the board's shoes and say, I can get someone who's been on boards for 10 years, or I can get someone who's never been on a board. Give me a reason. Give me a good reason. It might be possible to give me a good enough reason, but most of the time, if I'm a betting man, I'm not going to bet on the person with zero experience. So go for the not-for-profits. Go for the volunteer unpaid roles. I know it seems like I'm already saying in advance, you can't get that dream. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying the path to the dream. It's like anyone today who comes to me saying, I want to get started in tech. And I say, okay, this is literal advice I've handed out in the last week. Your first job is not going to be a good job. Right? Even your first two jobs are not going to be good jobs, because probably the first two jobs in anything are not going to be good jobs. You don't join a fashion brand as creative director. You work your way up as the intern, bringing lots of coffees and donuts to people. And you do very unsatisfying work for a long time while you build your skills, while you build your political capital, your networking, your contacts, all of these things. And board roles are no different at all. Right? And I've already talked about how I did a lot of volunteer work before I even had a chance of getting a paid role. And to be clear, I want to say up front, the money I get for IPSI, it is a matter of record. It's on the website. It's in the annual reports. It's not a lot of money. It's not something I'm ever going to quit a day job for. And frankly, I'm not doing it for the money. I love that I am getting money for it, simply because this is like the product management distinction between 0 to 1. There is no gap larger than the gap 0 to 1.
Yeah.
I wouldn't care if they just paid me £1 a year. That's not zero, and that's what matters. And I've similarly done speaking engagements for conferences where I say, I want you to pay me £1. It doesn't have to be anything more, but I want to be able to say I've had paid speaking engagements. All right,
Yes,
0 to 1.
That 0 to 1 is so important, isn't it?
It really is. So,
but even before you get to that, people undervalue, and I think you hit on this before, how useful the experience is and how much a difference it makes. So let's say we take somebody who has been a senior manager in a company but has had no board experience versus somebody who's been a senior manager but has maybe been a school governor or a trustee on a charity or a not-for-profit. It's a very different level of experience. And as you say, you've dealt with all that. How do we deal with conflict? How do we manage these things? School governor, you could be dealing with a budget that's running into millions of pounds, which maybe you've not had exposure to. As a senior manager, you've dealt with different people. You start to think about different things outside your swim lane. So I think a great step that somebody can pursue, rather than paying thousands of pounds for some training that may or may not be any good, is go and get that actual experience. Because like so many things, whether you're starting as a junior software engineer, it's always easier to get the next role when you have some experience on your CV. And again, even if it's, as we say, it's called governor on unpaid, you now have some experience, which is more than 0. And then you can increment that to step up to that first paid role, and then you can leverage that for moving forward.
Absolutely. And the reality is, all of these organisations who can't afford to pay their board directors, their trustees, their governors, are desperate for volunteers. They are so desperate. Their qualifications that they require, like, do you have a pulse? Like, you do, fine, you're in. They are almost not caring very much about it because it is so hard for them to find the people they need.
There's another great point coming back to something you mentioned earlier, and that resonates with both of us. We'd both love to keep learning, do more learning. And there are many, many of these volunteer positions that require your commitment of 4 or 6 board meetings a year and 1 or 2 away in training days. That training may be incredibly valuable and useful in your CV as well. For those of us that want to keep learning, maybe training that you might be worth thousands of pounds that you might not pay for yourself or you wouldn't get through your company. So again, that could be incredibly valuable and a benefit from it. So it can be a win-win for yourself and for the charity or school that you're working with. And again, it's starting to provide that stepping stone, isn't it, to the next goal.
Yeah.
There's one more interesting thing that I wanted to pick up on that you mentioned when we talked earlier, that you're increasingly seeing big tech companies advise senior managers to go out and get a board role, even if it's a voluntary one. Why is that? And what are the benefits that the companies see in them doing that?
Yeah, look, I heard this directly just a couple of weeks ago. I'm myself a student in a coaching program, mostly intended for senior managers in big tech, but also for senior individual contributors. And I was fortunate enough to apply for and be granted a scholarship there. I probably couldn't have afforded this otherwise. And I have been talking about my non-executive director and board experience there. And one of the people running the course said, "Well, that's really fascinating because for like our private coaching clients who buy one-on-one coaching, I've now had 12 people at the senior manager level in the largest tech companies in the world tell me over the last 3 months that they have all been told they cannot progress above senior manager to director level without getting some board experience somewhere. It doesn't have to be paid, but even just volunteer experience somewhere." And everyone was really fascinated to hear this. And they said, "What's going on there?" And I said, "Well, it seems that the top management in these companies think that it's exactly all the things we've been talking about. It demonstrates the people skills, it demonstrates going outside the wheelbase and the comfort zone, it shows a certain amount of initiative, it's a great leadership behavior, a leadership signal. If we distinguish leadership from management, there are a lot of managers who aren't particularly leaders, and this is a great way to get into leadership. And it goes the other way as well. I mean, I've already said I have never been a manager, let alone a senior manager, let alone an executive, right? So it's a way to get leadership without having to have the management as a prerequisite. It's a beautiful way to decouple these two ideas, that if you have one and you're lacking the other, here's how you might do that. But yeah, big tech senior managers are literally being told you are blocked in your promotion to director until you do this.
I was just thinking, as you mentioned that leadership without the management, there's probably a great example of many people in a lot of roles have progressed through their management career, getting things done through authority, which is not the best way of achieving things. Sometimes you have to use authority. It's, that's why we have it. But it's far better if you can lead by example, and people can choose to follow you. That's generally what makes you a leader, because people hear what you say or see what you do and go, "I want to follow them," because it's the followers that make you a leader. So coming on to that, I think probably pushing them outside to go and pursue that board thing is making them have to learn, if they haven't got it, how do I get things done via influence? I have no authority here. She say, noses in, hands out. I hope I've quoted that correctly. So I have no authority here. How do I get things done by influence? How do I learn to listen to other people and ask those questions, figure out what they want, and then, as you say, succinctly present my view without adding the 30 seconds on the end by talk myself out of it? How do I succinctly present that view and win people over? Basically, how do I build influence? And I can see that being incredibly useful because, again, you progress through any organization. You don't get things done at the C-suite or the board level by authority. You get things done by the influence and by reaching a mutual discussion and resolving the conflicts. So it's probably a great way for them of really focusing on building that influence and developing those skills.
It certainly has been for me. In my day job at the moment, I'm in one of London's banks and I am the technical lead on a cross-functional team project. And I am asking people from about 5 other teams to do work that, from their point of view, is unplanned work. It isn't in their book of work. I don't have authority over them. I'm not their manager and I'm not equivalent in rank to their managers. So if I just came over to them and said, "Hi, do this thing for me," the ones that like me might say, "Yeah, I can get around to that maybe late this year, maybe early next year." And the ones that don't like me would tell me to take a hike. And this is absolutely something that can only be achieved through influence. Influence is the only path to my success. And I could not have done it without what I've learned from the boards that I've sat on, because, as you say, it is all about influence at that level, because, strictly speaking, you have no operational authority to direct anyone in the organization to do anything at all.
And coming back to the kind of hard skills, soft skills separation and whether you get past senior, technical skills aren't going to cut it. You can't go to the other teams, you should do this and here's my technical argument. Because those decisions, as we said, are driven emotionally. You need to win people over. You need to have, as we say, influencing. Cool. I think I've covered many of the topics we intended to talk about. What should I have asked Joe that I haven't?
I would like the opportunity to say to your viewers that the traditional journey, the traditional trajectory, is not the only way of getting on a board. You don't need to have been a manager, a senior manager, and an executive, and you don't need to have done an MBA. I think it certainly helps, right? I mean, if they are considering 10 applicants and 2 have MBAs and 8 don't, that's certainly an advantage. But it's not the only path there. And this again goes back to diversity. And I'll go a step beyond diversity. Like, why is diversity valuable? It's this idea, and a beautiful book by the same name called The Wisdom of Crowds. Have you read this one? I love The Wisdom of Crowds. They tell a story about how they were trying to find a sunken ship in one of the world's oceans, and they asked a huge number of relevant experts, each with expertise in their own field, about 30 experts, where it was. And not a single one of the experts got it right. But they also plotted the coordinate average of those 30 answers, and the average was bang on the money. It's where the ship was. Like, what a great story. I love this. True story, true story. So the wisdom of crowds, the more people are different on the boards, the more valuable that is. And I think boards are starting to wake up to that. So I know on my main board, we are specifically saying we want more people who don't look like me. We want people who are not my age, who are not my gender, who don't have my work background, who aren't my race, who come from different places, who speak languages I don't speak. We would love to see people in their 30s, right? I mean, if someone had come to me in my 30s and said, do you want to get on a board? I would have thought, what? No, that's stratospherically out of my reach. But that's not the case. There's no reason to wait until you've got this many grey hairs. Right? And indeed, I think it's a competitive advantage to not.
Yeah, as we just talked about, the skills are transferable both up and down, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely so. And I'm using stuff that I get from my boards, including my humble little garden committee, every day in my day job and in job interviews. And now if I'm asked a question like, what's the biggest budget you've controlled? I said, well, actually, as a result of one of my boards, I've been responsible for enterprise-wide decisions of a budget of this many millions of pounds. That's a great thing to be able to say in a job interview for someone who has never formally been a manager.
Yeah, absolutely.
I even got to, I won't say fire, let's say I presided over and negotiated the exit of a CEO once. At one of the boards I've been on in the past. How many times do you get to say in a job interview, well, yes, I helped exit a CEO and recruit their replacement? I mean, that is a fun thing to be able to say.
Probably something to be careful with as well, if you're being interviewed by the CEO.
Well, yes, but to be clear, with that CEO in question, I mean, this was years ago now. We're still friends. We still meet socially, so no hard feelings, and that's the way to do it, right? I mean, it's make your business decisions. See if you can at least speak to the feelings and values involved, but still make good business sense. And that's what we did. We came up with a negotiated exit that made good business sense for all parties, and we were all smiling at the end of it. Right? That's the success story.
So we're back again to that point about influencing and understanding what they need, understanding why perhaps they weren't happy and it wasn't a good fit for them.
As I say, long time ago, different country and so on, but still, the only time in my life I could say I've done anything close to firing a CEO, and I'm going to dine out on that story in job interviews forever. Right?
Awesome, and why not? Okay, anything else you'd like to add, Joe?
Just get out there, just show up. There are a million organizations who are desperate for volunteers. Right? No place is too small or too humble. And in fact, I think there's an advantage in showing that we are not too proud as well, right? I mean, the fact that I started at a small community art gallery has impressed the socks off some of the boards I've interviewed for. People love that. They say, really? Someone with your background? Like you're an IT consultant with an MBA and you were in an art gallery. Like, And they love it. They eat it up. So find these organizations. They're easy to find. Even just go on LinkedIn, right? You can search on LinkedIn for non-executive director and trustee and governor, and there are plenty of jobs out there. And because they're not paying, not enough people are knocking at the door. They want to meet you.
Yeah. And there are many, as you say, many charities, many schools that need this support, need this expertise. You can learn from them and you can give back something to them in your community. Well worth doing.
Absolutely. No regrets. I love it and I'm going to do more of it.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, Joe.
Thank you for having me.